Alright, so in the very first video about aggregate expenditure, we talked about how production generates income, right? And income leads to expenditure. So, we showed this using the circular flow of income, right? Where there are four economic agents, including the domestic households, the financial institutions, the government, and domestic producers. So let's say a producer is producing a good X, right? And there are four components. One, the wages, and let's say he pays $2 for the wages. Next, let's say he pays the rent, another $2. Then say he pays the interest, that's the cost of capital, another $2. And finally, he keeps his profit margin, let's say of $4. So his total income, right, will be what he spends, what he sells this good X for. So summing up all the costs, that's 2 plus 2 plus 2, and his profit margin of 10, he sells it for 10. So $10 is the expenditure a household makes on good X, right? And this $10 is also the income of the producer, right? He earns $10 by selling the good X. His profit is $4, but he gets $10 for selling the good, while the household spends $10 for the good, right? So let's say this is the only one good in the entire economy. So the aggregate expenditure is 10, right? And the income, equilibrium income for the producer is also 10. So this implies that equilibrium income equals to aggregate expenditure, right? And this is your equilibrium income, and to show equilibrium income in a diagram, we use the 45-degree line. So a 45-degree line is one where at every point the output, denoted by Q, is equals to Y. That's the income. So at every point on the 45-degree line, the output equals the equilibrium income. The output equals the income. So if I sketch it over here, I draw the vertical and horizontal axes, and this will be equilibrium income. The vertical axis will be AE. So I'll first sketch the 45-degree line. So this is what the 45-degree line will look like. The angle over here will be 45, right? Now at every point Y equals to Q, the output, right? And now I'll sketch the aggregate expenditure function. Say this is the aggregate expenditure. Let me just extend it a little. Say this is the aggregate expenditure function, where the vertical intercept is A plus BQ plus I plus J, right? And the gradient is B1 minus T. So at the intersection point of the AE curve and the 45-degree line, that's this point. This point is basically the equilibrium income of the economy, right? Because at this point Y equals to Q because it's on the 45-degree line, but it's also equals to aggregate expenditure. So this is how you determine the income using the 45-degree line in a closed mixed economy, right? So this point is equilibrium income. Right. So I'll highlight a few points on this curve, on the 45-degree line. At one side, that's below the aggregate expenditure function, these points, the points in blue. So the points in blue are the points where your equilibrium income, right, that's the amount of income being spent on domestically produced goods and services, is higher than what is being produced, right? So this means that you're spending more than what's being produced, right? So aggregate expenditure is higher but output is lower, so this acts as a signal to produce more, right? It pushes an upward pressure on the it places an upward pressure on the output, right, which results in a rise in the output, resulting in a rise in equilibrium income, right? So this is when this is for all the points below the aggregate expenditure function, but the points in red, that's above the AE function, at all these points you're spending less than what's being produced, right? So this acts as a signal to produce less, to lower the production. Which results in a fall in output, resulting in a fall in equilibrium, resulting in AE equaling equilibrium income. Right. So this is one way to determine income in a closed mixed economy. The other way is through injections and withdrawals. So in the very first video, we talked about injections and withdrawals. Injections is basically everything being added back to the circular flow. That's investments and government expenditure. So the pluses in the circular flow, and withdrawals were the minuses, the negatives in the circular flow. That's taxes and savings, right? So equilibrium income is determined at the point where injections are equals to the withdrawals. So if we first talk about the injections in a closed economy are investments and government expenditure, right? So if I sketch the injections with income on the income on the x-axis, and on the y-axis I have injections, and if I sketch this is what it'll look like. I plus j. So this is what your what your injections look like on a sketch. Withdrawals, on the other hand, comprise of two: taxes and savings. So let's first talk about taxes. So when we were discussing disposable income, we talked about how taxes equals to TY, that's the tax revenue, minus the transfer payments, right? So if I am to sketch the taxes function, right, with income on the x-axis and taxes on the y-axis, right? So when income levels are 0, the T equals to minus Q. So I get I get the vertical intercept minus q. And when I differentiate the function to get the gradient of the line, I get t. So the tax rate is my gradient of the taxes function. So if I sketch it, this is what it will look like. The gradient being the average tax rate, right? So this is the sketch for taxation, for taxes. Savings, on the other hand, now when we were talking about consumption was A plus BYD, right? So if I have to save, right? So let's look at let's look at it from this point. Consumption is A plus B YD, right? So when my income levels are 0, I still will be consuming, right? There will still exist autonomous consumption, right? So when my income levels are 0, I'm still spending something, right? So this means that my income levels are 0, I'm spending something, so my savings at y equals to 0 will be minus a, because I'm not earning anything, but still I'm spending. So minus a. On the other hand, B is the marginal propensity to consume, right? If B is the marginal propensity to consume, then the marginal propensity to save is 1 minus B of how much will I save of my income, right? So if I do this, this will be plus how much I save from the leftover income, 1 minus B of the remaining income. Right, so if I sketch the function, right, so if I sketch the function, the vertical intercept will be A, because even at 0 levels of income, I'm still spending something, right? I'm still spending, right? And the gradient will be 1 minus b. If I differentiate the function, I'll get the gradient to be 1 minus b. Quite opposite of the consumption function, right? So this is how my savings function and my taxes function, and if I join the two together to form the function for withdrawals with y over here and withdrawals on the vertical axis, so the vertical intercept will be minus a minus q, right? The gradient on the other hand will be t plus 1 minus b. So this is your withdrawals function. So now let's talk about income determination using withdrawals equals to injections. So I'll quickly sketch the two functions, right? One will be the withdrawals function, the injections, and the other, on the other hand, will be withdrawals. Let me just label this entire diagram quickly. Y over here, AE, I plus J for this vertical intercept, and minus A minus Q for this one. So the second method of determination of the equilibrium income is at the point where injections equal your withdrawals. That's this point. So I'll use a different color to show this. And this over here will be the equilibrium income, right? Hang on a second. The vertical axis is withdrawals and injections. So this is the other way to determine the equilibrium income in an economy at the point where withdrawals equals to injections. That is, the pluses equals the minuses, because injections have lead to a positive impact on aggregate expenditure, while withdrawals, that are the leakages, lead to a negative impact on the on the aggregate expenditure. Now, if aggregate expenditure is above the 45-degree line, this means that economy is using up its savings, and producers will respond by increasing their production levels, and the economy will move back to the equilibrium. That's if the economy is at this point, right? On the other hand, if it's below the equilibrium, that's this point, this means that economy is saving, and the output that's being produced is not being bought. This means that producers will react by cutting back on their production levels, and economy will move back to its equilibrium income, right? So this is how you determine your equilibrium income, one by means of 45-degree line, and the other through the injections equals to withdrawals. Right. In the next video, we'll talk about the full employment national income versus the equilibrium level of income. That's it for this one.